This is Canada Reads American Style, featuring two friends who love Canada Reads and Canadian literature. Welcome our host Rebecca from Michigan and Tara from Ontario. Hi everyone, it is Rebecca and Tara, and today, if you've looked at the title of our podcast, it's Love It, Hate It, which may seem very controversial as people who don't like to ever say we don't like something.
Yep. Online, I should say,
Yeah.
because
Oh,
we
yeah.
do say it to each other.
Exactly. So I will say that we're going to start, though, with what is kind of going on in our lives, because you told me something right before we started recording that I'm very excited about for you. So
Yes.
what are you doing?
I started doing some watercolor painting last week. I
Wow.
know. I've been thinking the last few months that I wanted to do something new creatively. I felt the need to do something new. And I wasn't sure what. And I've gone back and forth, back and forth. I was going to build miniatures at one point. I had a
Ooh.
list and I'm like, I'm going to build miniatures. And then I'm like, well, where the hell am I going to excuse my language, where the hell am I going to store these miniatures? I'm like, that's ridiculous, Tara, stop it. And then I realized when I was younger, when I was a kid, I loved drawing. I've always
Oh,
wanted to paint.
yeah.
And I follow a watercolor painter on Instagram. I think her name is Andrea Nelson. And she just does beautiful, colorful, animated paintings and she gives little tutorials and stuff like this. So I've started drawing every now and then. I will, during work meetings that are virtual, I will grab my sketch pad and I've just had fun
Cool.
drawing, which I love because I've stopped putting pressure on myself for something to look like how it's actually supposed to look
Mm-hmm.
and just doodling. And then I've also purchased one of this Andrea Nelson, I believe that's her name, has online virtual classes. So I
Wow.
purchased one of those, and the classes are always there. They don't disappear. You can do it at your own pace. And watercoloring just requires paper, the proper paper, a paintbrush and paints, and you're ready to go. And it's so much fun. I can't wait to do it again this weekend. I'm doing it again. It's just fun.
That is just amazing. A
Yeah.
couple things.
Yeah.
When you said you were looking for a new creative outlet, I'm sure most people know by now that you also do knitting
Hmm.
because you've talked about that before in the past. So are
Yeah.
you no longer knitting really, or?
Not real I'm still knitting, but not a lot because I have always my knitting time has been in the evenings. And I have found that as I'm getting older, I am more tired in the evenings. And when I used to not be able to just sit there and watch TV, when I was like, I have to have something to do. I must be doing something. I can't just sit here. I am actually pretty happy just sitting there and watching TV now. So
Oh,
in the
yeah.
evenings, I'm just I really just want to mellow out and just watch TV or work on my jigsaw puzzle. So I'm I really think I might be 72. I
Well, I'm not 72 yet, but I have to
Yep,
laugh because I just bought a new jigsaw puzzle,
yep.
and it is, oh my gosh, the Mexican
Oh,
artist.
Frida?
Yes, Frida
Yeah,
Kahlo. Geez, I
yeah.
couldn't think of her name. I would say with the eyebrows. But anyway, but it's a really weird puzzle. The puzzle pieces are weird shapes, and
Oh,
so I
yes.
can't even get the outline. And I only
Yeah,
do 500 pieces. I do not do less or more. 500 is good for me.
yep,
And so I kind of "Ugh, this puzzle is just too hard. I can't
yeah,
get the
that's
outline." Anyway.
yeah, that's tough. I was gonna say, my mom is 72. Sorry, mom. My mom is 72, and she might be 73. Sorry again, mom. But anyways, she doesn't care. She doesn't do puzzles. So why am I there are 22-year-olds who do puzzles.
That's
Doing
true.
puzzles
That's
is
true.
awesome. It's so much fun.
Yeah.
Again, something I've always wanted to do, and I've really embraced it the past year and a half. And I really like doing my puzzles. And I'm finding knitting in the evening is requiring a little too much, makes my eyes tired, requiring a little too much attention that I don't always have. So,
Yeah.
but the painting, obviously, I'm not doing it at nighttime. I'm doing it in the afternoon sometime, and just
Yeah. It's so exciting. That is so
it is.
cool.
So yeah, well, you'll probably get a bookmark or a
Yay.
card. I know, because I'm like, I'm not doing it for the purpose of it looking good or anything, but I'm like, people are going to get cards, and it's
Yep.
going to be my watercolors, and it ain't going to be pretty, but it is going to be beautiful
It
in a
will,
weird way,
and
right?
it will be beautiful and it will be personal, and that's the best thing.
Yeah.
And I will send you now that I have a little more time. I want to get back to my collage work, and I will send you a card because I did say that I would send you one, and haven't done that yet. So, and I also owe one to Colleen because I told her I would send her one as well, and I didn't get that done. So,
Oh, Colleen will get a watercolor bookmark as well.
yay, that's very cool. So, what are you currently reading?
Okay, I'm going to bring my latest poetry to
Oh,
tonight.
okay.
I know. So it is The Meaning of Leaving by Kate Rogers. So Ontario poet. I believe it comes out later in February. So I got an advanced, like a copy from the author herself and the publisher through River Street Writing. They sent it to me. It's a
Mhm.
beautiful cover
Oh,
here.
I
It's
saw
a,
that. Somebody else
oh,
posted about it recently, and it's a gorgeous cover.
oh,
Yeah.
Rebecca, I know
Yeah.
you're not a poetry person, but you
Mhm.
want to read this.
Okay.
It's so good. It is like I picked it up, so I think I got it 2 days ago, like, the evening. What is today? Today is Thursday, so I got it Tuesday evening.
Mhm.
Wednesday morning, I picked it up with my coffee, and I'm like, "Oh, I'll read one poem," and I was like, "In." It's the kind of poetry book I actually want to fly through, which generally
Yeah.
for poetry, I like to, like, sample 1 or 2 and put it back, but it's fantastic.
Yeah.
She
Oh my
it's
gosh.
like constant gut punches and kicks and pulling the hair out, but it is so good.
Oh,
It's
wow.
so good. So highly recommend The Meaning of Leaving by Kate Rogers. If anyone wants to like it's also very accessible. Like it's accessible in that you're going to just want to jump in. Her language is open. You know what she's talking about, but it's beautiful language. It is essentially about her leaving different, really horrible situations in her lifetime,
Oh.
an abusive relationship, marriage, father, like a child. I feel like it's a childhood with quite a bit of trauma in it. It's really good.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, somebody else just posted about it, and I actually even looked up the title because I thought, first of all, that cover looks beautiful, and then
Yeah,
whatever they wrote about it was really lovely, and so I
yeah,
did kinda look at it. I have to admit, I did see it was poetry, and then I went, "Eh," but I'm gonna let me know if
yeah,
you think by the time you're finished with it, if you think I might enjoy that.
yeah. I will like one of the poems. I'm not going to read it out because it's a longer poem,
Mhm.
but it is called "The Passing of Sean Connery," and it has a quote from him, which has become quite popular, which I think, unfortunately, I did not really realize before he passed, which was, "I don't think there is anything particularly wrong in hitting a woman, though I don't recommend you do it the same way you hit a man." So that's what starts her poem.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's about her marriage.
I didn't know he said that, but yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
So, yep. So, it's a ride. It's not daffodils in a field.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's bruises.
Now,
Okay.
our podcast, love it, hate it. Why are we discussing this today?
Yeah. Do you want me to explain
Absolutely. You
where this
started
came
it.
from? Okay.
Yeah. You
I
started
kind
the
of
whole
did.
you started the whole thing, but I love this concept that we're gonna be talking about,
Yeah.
so go for it.
Okay. So, as we all know, Canada Reads is just around the corner, and Rebecca and I like to read at least the short list prior to the competition. One of the books on the short list is Meet Me at the Lake by Carley Fortune, a romance. Rebecca tried it, and it wasn't for you, so you passed on it.
Yes.
But I was like, oh, I'm gonna. It was on my to be on my TBR, so I'm gonna read it anyways, and then I'll report back to you. So
Yes.
I did read it, and I will and in defense of the book, I did give it 3 stars because I read it, I started it. I wanted to know the story, like I wanted to know what happened, and I finished it. However, 3 stars is not great for me. Like I don't read a lot of 3-star books because I think I give them up at that point. But the plot just was like, you know, potato chips. You wanted to keep going to see what happens. So once I was finished, I'm like, okay, time to report to Rebecca. And I left you at least 3 10-minute voicemails about what I did not like about the book. And
Yes.
going, like, I would lead the first one, I was like, okay, I finished the book. Here it is. Bloop, verbal diarrhea. And I stopped it and I sent it. And then I was like, oh, wait, I have something to add. Here's another bloop, bloop, bloop. And then, oh, wait, and there's also this bloop, bloop. Like it was, and she loves voicemails.
I loved it. It
Yeah.
was
So,
fabulous.
because I felt so bad. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've just like bombarded you with this book. But she was, very gracious about it.
Well, I loved it because I think it's probably one of the most detailed discussions of a book it wasn't a discussion because it was one-sided, but it was one of the most detailed descriptions of a book someone didn't like, and it just made me start thinking about a million other things
Yes.
about the fact that we were having this discussion. So I felt like I had read the book after you were done because you did give great descriptive reasons for why it wasn't your favorite book, and I really enjoyed that. So then
Yeah.
we ended up, having this bigger discussion.
Yeah. Because we were then like, I'm like, I'm so sorry. And then I was like, well, why was I able to talk for 30 minutes about a book that I didn't like, and tell you the reasons, very specific reasons why I didn't like it? But when we talk generally about a book we love, we'll just be like, oh my God, I love this book so much. It was beautiful. Everyone must read it. And then
Yeah.
you kind of like, well, I must say,
That's so true because I think about if you go back and probably listen to all the podcasts and say, "What did she say specific" I'm talking about myself. "What did
me
she
too.
specifically say why she liked the book?" It would be, "Oh, it's so beautiful language. I love the character." I mean,
Yeah.
it's so less descriptive about why we love something versus why we well, I hate to say hate, but we just
Yeah.
called it love it,
So,
hate it. But
yeah.
why we hated something or why we didn't like something strongly, right?
Because I didn't hate Meet Me at the Lake, because I
Yeah.
did finish it, like, I did want to know what happened, and I also think that if I had read it outside of Canada Reads,
Mhm.
I may have had less issue with it, like, I think I was reading it with the focus that it's on the short list, that
Mhm.
maybe other books got pushed aside for this one to be on the short list, and also in the theme of resilience and the one book for all of Canada to read. So that kind of did shift my focus a little bit as well, I think. But still, it led to this.
Yeah, so what we decided to do today was to bring each of us bring a book, 2 books, a book we quote hated or really didn't like, and a book we really loved, and we wanted to be able to explain why we didn't like it or why we loved it with a little bit more emphasis or ability to articulate why we really liked something because I think what you did was exactly what probably everybody does with their friends. Well, some people
Mhm.
put it online, which I wouldn't do, and I know you
No,
wouldn't do,
no.
because again, we really respect authors and they work so hard and I can't write a book. So they do something I can't even do. So I would never bash them. Like I would never put it in writing. And even though we're going to talk about this on the podcast, we're trying to illustrate the point of we often will say a lot more in detail about what we didn't like versus what we liked. And that was kind of what we wanted to flesh out a little bit.
Yeah. And I think we both agreed too at one point that I think part of why we don't share more about why we like a book is because we don't want to spoil it
Mhm.
for anyone, whereas when I was telling Rebecca about Meet Me at the Lake, I knew she wasn't going to read it, but yet she wanted to know about it. So I didn't mind. I knew she wanted spoilers.
Yeah.
So I was like all in there to give her the spoilers kind of thing. Whereas I think sometimes we're afraid to say too much about a book. So
Mhm.
instead of saying, I loved it when this happened, or I love that this was the ending, bop, 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 where we don't really want to say that.
Yeah, and I think a perfect example of that actually is Denison Avenue because somebody, one of our friends even said to me, "Oh, you didn't even mention this when you reviewed the book on your podcast." And I said, "Well, it's because that piece of information to me, I didn't know it was going to happen. Maybe if I had read The Dust Jacket, I really would have known it was coming, but I didn't know. And I love to be completely surprised so that I just am so absorbed in a story. And so I didn't share that part either. And it's kind of how the book starts, what
Yeah.
happens in the beginning, right? And I just didn't want to say anything to ruin it for someone else because I loved not knowing that in the beginning. So I do agree with you that partly why we don't go into great detail is because we don't want to have spoilers.
Hmm. Hmm.
So in this case, we will say up front, we are going to have spoilers today, right? I mean, are you going to have
Yes.
spoilers?
Yes. I'm going to try and keep it not too spoilery, but
Yeah.
there might be something.
I will agree that I'm doing the same because one of the books I want to talk about you haven't read yet and you want to. So I am going to be very more careful than I would be if I knew you had read it. So we will say mild spoiler alert. So when you hear us talking about these particular 4 books, we'll leave it up to you to make that decision how far into the discussion you go. How's that?
Yeah.
So do you want to go first and how do you want to start with what you loved, what you didn't love?
Let's go with, because I made my choice pretty easy. I
Okay.
went with, let's go with the book that I didn't like or that
Okay.
didn't work for me, because I hate to say I didn't like it because again, I finished it.
Yeah.
Whereas, so I'm going to start, and no surprise, it's going to be Meet Me at the Lake by Carley
Yeah.
Fortune because it's the most recent one that didn't work for me.
Right.
This was like a really interesting exercise though, because Rebecca and I decided to not shred it down, but like pare it down, that's the word, to 3 points for each book.
Mhm.
And obviously, I had more than 3 points when
Uh-oh,
I
I
gave
have
it to Rebecca. Oh,
I have
you can.
4. Okay,
Oh,
go ahead. Okay.
I'm not sure about four.
I know.
So I tried to, like, it was a really interesting exercise for both because it
Mhm.
made me think of why a book doesn't really work for me. And
Mhm.
interestingly, another book that I'm reading at the moment, so not my poetry book, may also not be working for me. And
Hmm.
yeah, I'm trying to think a little more critically about why it's not working and
Oh,
in the past, what has not worked for me.
yeah.
I just started it today. So it's like it wasn't even a planned, obviously, not planned.
Mhm.
I don't plan to read a book I didn't like, but in this case, I did. Okay, so let's get back to Meet Me at the Lake. So my first big issue with this one is that I think the problem, the conflict between the two main characters are like love interests could have been resolved if they had just spoken truthfully to each other. That's a, there, and then I know you don't have a story, but if that,
Right. Right.
and
Yeah.
so which is that, then I'm like, okay, so I couldn't not get away. There were so many times in the book when I'm just like, why did he not tell her this? And why did he not tell her this? It was just, there were so many times when he was just would not speak to her and just would blatantly say, I can't tell you. Well, why the fuck not? I'm like, why not?
I have to jump in here and I'll tell you
Yeah.
why not. I'll give you a reason why not.
Okay.
One of the I listen to 2 things on TikTok every day obsessively. One of them is Veronica and the Baby Boo. I'm just saying if you've never listened to them, go check out Veronica and the Baby Boo, Talking Cats, they're hilarious. The other thing I listen to is I think it's Meg Tran, I think is her account name, but it's second date update. So people who went on a first date basically and then ghosted
Mm,
somebody, right?
yeah.
And here's what I've learned in listening to this for a year now, obsessively, there must be like 5, 6 of them every day I listen to. People don't communicate with each other. So I hate to tell you, but it
Okay.
turns
They
out
just don't do it.
they just don't. And that's what almost every time they do a call, Meg will say in the comments, if they would just communicate, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. And I think, yeah, I think that's normal. I hate which
Oh,
I agree with you. If I read that, I'd be like, for God's sakes, just speak to each other.
just don't. Tell her why you didn't say hi to her at the lake when you were supposed to meet.
Yeah.
Spoiler, he doesn't say hi.
Oh
Like,
my
and
gosh.
spoiler, like, this is not a spoiler, it's a romance. So they get together at the end, and she gives him a pass for
Ugh.
all of this previous behavior. She just says, if you just apologize, it'll be
Oh,
fine. I'm
wow.
like, really? We're just giving them, really?
Yep.
So that was my first problem with it. And obviously not first because it was just throughout the whole book. Two, I found the main character. I can't remember her name. Oh
Mhm.
well. She had a lot of body image centered statements that were negative towards both herself and towards her best friend who had just had a baby. And I didn't find that they didn't move the plot forward and they didn't reveal character. Like I don't know why it was necessary for her to say that her best friend, who had just had a baby a few months before, looked a little sweaty, had lost some hair around the hairline, and looked even worse than she thought she did. Like that just kind of bugged me. They were just
Yeah.
like little boop boop. So I'm
Mhm.
like, that wasn't necessary. Third, the ending. Nice. Obviously they get together,
Yeah.
but I don't know how spoilery.
But they shouldn't have, right? In your
They shouldn't
opinion?
have. No. And then it's all wrapped up at the end like a really nice little bow. I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but like it's just like it's mm,
It's a romance. So, I mean, everybody let's face
romance.
it, we all expect that they live
Yeah.
happily ever after, right? I mean, really.
So it's just, and you find like a little nugget at the end, and you're supposed to be like, oh,
Oh, yeah, that's right. You told me,
right,
yeah.
yeah. And
Mhm.
I'm like, I just like that's a big. I feel like I don't really want to spoil that because if someone is reading the book, that's at the very end, and it's supposed to be this special moment. Wasn't a special moment for me. I felt like it just fed into what women are supposed to fit themselves into in a relationship.
Mhm. So, the what I my takeaway from all of what you talked about was perhaps that thing at the end, had that been incorporated into the story, and that was sort of you understood that as a reader from kind of even not necessarily at the beginning, but let's say halfway through, then it's something that you could have been like, "Oh, okay, I can see
Mhm.
why this is a theme, and I can see where you're going with it." But, yeah, it just for me, I just felt like I hate to say this, but this is what it sounded like. I'm just gonna say I didn't read it. I did read the first chapter, and I was like, I just can't continue," but I just feel like it's propaganda for women.
Yeah.
It's romantic propaganda where women are supposed to excuse bad behavior or whatever in the name of love, and that's actually kind of often one of my issues with romance novels is that if you broke it down into real life and this was your best friend who was having this relationship, would you really be encouraging them to follow through in whatever, or would you be or let's say not say your best friend because maybe you don't wanna tell your friend the truth, but your own sister, let's say,
Yeah.
right? And you'd be like, "What the hell? Get away from that person," or
Yeah.
whatever. But sometimes I know romance, is a genre that is very hopeful and whatever, but I just feel like I see so many amazing relationships, again, on TikTok, I watch a lot of TikTok, but I see so many what appear to be amazing relationships where people have evolved into a new way of being, and it's not that old-fashioned sort of romance style that we've been sold. That's how I feel, but
Yeah.
sorry about that. That's some of my
No,
issues about
no, it's a good
romances.
take. And
Yeah.
also she found his elbow sexy. Come on,
Oh.
elbows aren't sexy. Elbows are not sexy.
Okay, but back in the day, this is the part of like a wrist. I loved a man's wrist.
I'm okay
I'm
with
not
the
gonna
wrist,
lie,
but
but
an
an elbow,
elbow,
no.
especially if it's from behind and it's like your arm is
Oh,
straight down,
oh,
elbows are terrible looking from
they
like
are.
behind. Yeah. Mm-mm.
I love it. Oh my god, that is hilarious. Okay,
But now, I will give a positive. I
okay,
would have loved to. I would love to know the story between her mother and her mother's best friend, which was only hinted at. We got a little bit of it. That's a story. That's a love story that I would love to have. A love story as opposed to a romance where they just like bone. I want a love
yeah.
story.
That's what
right?
okay, you just said something that I will now say. Okay, brace yourselves, everybody. I will say this from the beginning, from now until I die, which is that's what I want. I want a love
Yeah,
story, but I don't want a romance.
yeah.
I love that. Oh, I love that phrase. I'm going to remember it. So, okay.
Okay, your turn.
Okay, so I'm going to be more bold than Tara here
Okay.
because I hated this book. I hated this book so much, and I hated this book, and it's the first time that I can ever think of in my life that I hated a book written by an author that I love, whose work I love. I just don't even remember ever doing this. It is Road Ends by Mary Lawson. And I even went back and looked to see if I ever talked about it on the podcast. And I did. I think I made reference to not liking it a few times, but I never did actually discuss it. And the reason I didn't is because I hate it. And I didn't want to do spoilers about why I hated it. And also, I love Mary Lawson. I just think
Yeah.
she is amazing. I have loved her other 2 or 3 books that I've read, and I still think I have one more to go, but I'll be careful in talking about this one.
You know what? I'm okay with spoilers. Don't worry about me.
No, I really no, because I really want to see when you read it, if you come
Okay.
away with the same concept or same
Yeah.
idea that I had about it. So I'm gonna be kinda careful, but here's the thing. I did give it 3 stars because I think if you were just to strip away the story, kind of I hate to say it that way, but if you stripped away the story, Mary Lawson's writing is beautiful. It is quiet, it's descriptive. She's writing about rural Ontario in a small town, and I love all of that. And that's one of the reasons I love her. So I did give it 3 stars, but every time I think about this book, I get angry. So here's the thing. I think number 1,
Yeah.
it is really misogynistic. I mean, it is like
Really?
really misogynistic. Now, it covers a 3-year period in the 60s. I think it's like 64 to 68, 7 or something like that. And it's a story told about 3 people in a family, a father and a daughter and a son, although they're both adults, the children are adults. And they are a very dysfunctional family. So I would love to talk to Mary Lawson respectfully and say, is part of the reason it feels so misogynistic because the world was more misogynistic in the 60s? Like, is
Mm,
that kind of why this is the way it is? But even the way the males treat the females in the story, and there's one of the son has relationship with a female, or I can't remember if he actually does have a relationship or not. But anyway, there's this experience, and he talks about anyway, it was just so foul how he talked about her and how he treated her. So it's to me, it's misogynistic. Number 2, none of the males in the story are held accountable for anything. And I mean to tell you, the things they did and didn't do were appalling. Because again, this is a really dysfunctional family. Number 4, this story is very dark, and these are people who lived really painful, awful lives. Now, if you read the reviews, I did find a couple of reviews that agreed with me and said what I would say about it. All the rest of them, it was kind of funny actually. A lot of them have said, "Wow, this is really dark and depressing, but I love Mary Lawson. I love how she writes about dysfunctional families, etc., etc." So, going into it, don't think you're reading a happy family story because you are not. And then the last part is, I am sorry, but even the New York Times, I think it was, wrote a review that said something like, not they didn't use the word hope, but they almost led you to believe like there's going to be some kind of an uplift at the end. And I am telling you right now, that book had zero hope in my
mm,
opinion. And so I read it and I finished it because it's Mary Lawson and I'm going to, and I kept thinking I need to know what happens to Meg the daughter, and I just hate this story so much. And when I read some of the reviews, I thought, okay, I can see what people are saying and why they gave it 5 stars, a lot of 5 stars. But I thought, I just 100% disagree. I can't even and even a 3 to me is really generous because what I'd like to do is give it a 1, but I won't do that, so
Mm.
I know.
I did not realize you hated it that like, I knew you
I
were
hate it.
disappointed in the ending.
I
I
hated it.
did not realize you had such strong feelings.
I hated the story, but the
Mhm.
writing is still beautiful. The
Yeah.
writing is Mary Law. Everything about it, and that's why I say there are a ton of five-star reviews, people that loved it, but I just could not get past I it's kind of odd. There were parts of it that I identified with
Mhm.
personally, and I don't know if that's why I had such a visceral, strong reaction to it,
Mhm.
but not to the degree that I mean, my god, these people were really like, when you oh my god, anyway, yeah. They're awful people.
How old is the book? Like, when was it published? Do you know?
That's really interesting. Let me look it up really quick because it wasn't I don't think it's been that long ago. Let me look it up really quick here. Published in 2013.
Yeah. So 10 years. It's so not super old, but
That's the other thing I thought about is, would she write the same story today?
mhm.
But again, it's set in the '60s, so maybe
Yeah.
that was part of her point, but even the New York Times doesn't mention it, and no one seems to mention except for a few reviews I found that totally said what I would have said in a written review.
Interesting.
I can't wait till you read it, and I know whenever you get to it, but it's I just wonder if you will look at me and go, "What the fuck are you" sorry, "What the heck are you thinking?"
I think I already used the F bomb already, don't worry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But, like, what were you thinking here? So why are you so like, why do you hate this book so much? But I'll be curious if you I don't think you will feel the same way I do. I don't
I'm
think you
gonna
will.
bump it up. Let's say by the spring. Let's say by May,
Whoa.
I'll have read it because
Okay.
I'm way behind on my little TBR stacks that I build here, but
Mhm.
I'm gonna do it by the spring, before the summer,
Or by the
before
summer.
the summer,
Just
before the
yeah.
summer. Yeah.
There you go. Cool. I can't wait to hear what you think. Excellent.
Interesting. Okay. For a book that I liked or that I enjoyed, like
Mhm.
really enjoyed, I chose The Double Life of Benson You by Kevin
Ooh.
Chong because this was almost a book that I wasn't sure if I was going to like. It was shortlisted for the Giller last year.
Mhm.
I was intrigued by it, but I thought it could go either way. I could really like it,
Mhm.
or I'm like, it could be a failure for me.
Yeah.
It was not a failure. I end up loving the book, very dark. This was difficult when I'm like, now I had to sit down and think of, I'm like, 3, like, reasons why I loved the book.
Is this fiction? I can't remember. Is this a memoir?
Yes, this is fiction. Yeah.
Okay, good.
So, okay, let's go with the first point. The reason why I liked it, I liked the structure. I like how his writing style and the structure. So he had both the past, was the first part of the book was the past in the 80s, and then you kind of time warped to the second half of the book was the present. But elements from the past were worked into it, so I really liked that. There were multiple POVs because you got the point of view of Benny, who was I think about 12 years old, so like a pre-adolescent young boy living in Chinatown in Vancouver in the 80s, to you, who's present day an adult man, married with a child, graphic novelist, like comic book artist and stuff like this, in the present. And then the two came together. So you got both of their point of views. At sometimes two crossed over, or you would also get first person and third person switching even within. I know it sounds really the first like 10 pages I was like, "Ooh, what's going on?" Because even in a paragraph sometimes you would get first person switching over to third person in the same paragraph. I just decided to go with it. I'm really glad I did because it was part of the story. Like it was when you
Mhm.
got into it, I realized that that switching POV and narratives, first person, third person, was just part of telling you the story. And I really liked when the structure can mirror the story or adds to it. So I really liked that part of it. I
Yeah.
love the characters. I really like a character in which I can become invested. And I loved young Benny. I wanted to hug Benny. I wanted to
Oh.
protect him. And There was a moment when he stands up and he fights for himself, and I couldn't be prouder of Benny. And at the same time, you made me angry. Like, I was super angry and frustrated at some of the choices that you made, and one in particular that he made that I will not say because this will be a big spoiler moment in it. But
Okay.
so I was super angry with him, did not like him. However, Kevin Chong's writing, I was able to understand Yu's motivation for why he did what he did,
Yeah.
and all stems back to childhood trauma, and I love that. If you can, like, give me a character that I don't like, but I understand
Mhm.
what's behind his motivation, his actions,
Yeah.
then I really like that. And then I also love the meta effect. It was a book inside of a book, and reality versus the story. And I have a little quote to show this, and I love this stuff. I really do. The quote: "At some point, after I've stirred the pot of real life with made up backstory, these semi fictional beings always revolt against me, freeing themselves to make their own startling, self defeating choices." It's really, I'm like, that's just a cool line. And I love that whole idea that you were just at, I did not know, am I getting Benny's story? Is it Yu's story? Is this the story or versus real life? Like, is this the comic book? It's just a fantastic book.
You love non-traditional storytelling,
I
don't you think?
do. Yes.
You love a different
Yeah.
perspective, a different writing style.
Yeah. And this, I think I've only read 4 or 5 of the last year's Giller, but what I've read, there is a theme that last year's jury was really looking at the craft of writing and
Mm.
playing with structure and stuff in
Oh,
last
that's
year's.
interesting.
Yeah, at least in their short list, they were for sure.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to read the rest of the long list and see if it kind of that carries through. But I had a feeling it did.
And what won last year?
Um, Study of, or study for disobedience, or study of disobedience, yeah, and that one played a lot with storytelling and
Mhm.
structure. Burnham Wood was another
Mhm.
one, same thing, that had, like, a different way of the structure was slightly different and a little non-traditional. There was a lot of,
Yeah.
that's all I can remember at the moment, maybe because that's the only ones I've read, but
That's all you've read
uh,
from last year?
I don't
No,
think so. I
you
must have
read a
read
lot
more,
more.
but here, I'm gonna stretch across and get my other book
Yeah.
that I have the list in.
I feel like you have read more.
Oh, Girlfriend on Mars. Yeah, and that was a long list, not shortlisted. So that's the 4 that I've read, and that one was very different
I
as
don't even
well.
remember that one. Did you ever talk about that one? I
I
don't think you
don't
did.
know, because that was, like, back in September. It was a while ago that I read it.
That's weird. I don't even remember that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I will continue, but I got a feeling that's gonna be a theme throughout that
Yeah.
long list, the Gillers last year. Okay, what's yours?
I'm sticking with the theme of love it, hate it. So I gave you one I
Yep,
hated. I'm giving you one that I loved.
nice.
And I will not go into a lot of detail, but I do want to say again why I love this book so much. So I thought about Greenwood, 5
Mm,
stars, Michael Christie's Greenwood. It was just, it was on Canada Reads and it was on the Giller list. I mean, it was just
yep,
amazing, right?
yep,
So here's what I loved about it. And this is, I think you made a point of saying, going forward, you're going to think more about like why something's not working for you. I,
yep,
I kind of am going to do the same things with whether I liked it or I didn't like it. I want to better articulate what I felt either way. So here's what I loved about Greenwood. I loved the language. I loved his writing. It was so quotable. I felt like there were so many things that he said in the book that I was highlighting so
mhm,
many different things, right? Because
yep,
I actually read it as an ebook and then I bought a copy because I just had to own it. He has memorable characters. I mean, brothers Everett and Harris to me were just characters that I will never forget. I'll forget their names because, whatever, but
yep,
I will not forget these two brothers, these two characters that were so amazing. Also, within this story, I loved how and I was able to interview him, which I was really excited about, but the author Michael Christie, and the imagery of the tree rings and how the family grows within the story because it starts out in the future, then it goes into the present or the past. It kind of changes time periods as he's
Mhm.
telling the story. And just that imagery of the tree, it's set in Vancouver, or initially is set in the Vancouver in a forested, like a forested area that's being protected, etc. But just that whole idea, just immediately the book cover, everything about it just made me jump right in and feel that vibe that he was kind of giving us.
Yep.
And then also, in this case, I thought he did an amazing job of the balance between the painful and beautiful aspects of his characters' lives, because there were things that I remember, like ugly crying about certain things, and then also just how beautiful and how painful the stories were, the backstories, but still how much I loved all these characters. And so I think that's really, I was kind of even thinking about, Road Ends. I didn't have that feeling about the characters well, they're memorable, certainly, because I hated the book, but it there was, and in this story, there were painful, horrible things that happened. These families were dysfunctional. They were very dysfunctional, but in a way that made me care about the characters and not feel angry at the characters.
Mm,
So anyway, that is what I loved about Greenwood.
yeah. Can I circle back and not to speak
Yeah.
for you? I also think that you loved the love story as opposed to the romance, didn't you? In that case,
Mhm.
yeah. I
Yeah,
remember you
that
saying that. Yeah,
because that's what I say, and thank you for bringing that up, because when there's a love story within a book that is not a romance book, those are the romance ones that I remember forever. Like, they just really hit me because they're natural, they feel real. I feel like I'm looking at real people having a real emotional connection versus, a more formulaic kind of romance novel. So, yeah.
yeah.
Mhm. So, I will just say this. So, going
Okay.
forward, when we do review our books, because I think we did pretty good. I don't think we gave any real spoilers here.
No, and I don't think we were like mean, like unnecessarily mean.
Yeah. Well, I might be a little mean by saying I hate that book.
Yeah, and I was nitpicking with the elbow thing too, but
Okay, but that's legit. I'm
but
sorry,
that's
but I
legit. Yeah.
I totally agree with you. And especially when you get older. I don't know how old the characters were, but as you get older, elbows are really like,
Oh yeah,
no.
they go downhill fast,
Exactly. And I'm
like
older.
toes.
I can say that. Oh god, yes. Oh my god. But it's a privilege to get older. I will say that.
I do believe it too.
Yeah, I believe
Yeah,
that. Going forward, I really want to be able to better articulate to all of you why I really loved something. And I don't know that I've ever done that, because I do, when as soon as you said that when we were talking, you said like, oh, when we say like, oh, it was beautiful. I loved it because it was so beautiful, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, God, I feel like that's what I say about like probably 90% of the books
yeah,
that I
me
love,
too.
right? Oh, it's so beautiful. Writing is so beautiful. So I thought I'm going to make more effort to better explain what I love or what I don't love about a book.
Me too. And trying to think more critically
Mhm.
about it all, even like when I don't like a book, instead of just being like, bah, throwing it down, be like, okay, Tara, why did you not like
Yeah.
this book?
I will say this though, don't you agree that when we don't really like a book, I mean, I'll DNF a book I'm not liking.
Yeah, me too.
I was committed to Mary Lawson, so there was no way I wasn't gonna read it.
Yeah.
But I went back and even started looking at the books I didn't like, and I don't really have that many books I didn't like, because if I'm not enjoying it, I just DNF.
Yeah, me too. That's why I'm like, I'm gonna stick with Meet Me at the Lake, even though I kind of said my thing at the beginning too. I'm like, I gotta stick with this because it's my most recent didn't like. Like I think I was going way back
Yeah.
several months and I was like, I can't remember why I didn't like it because I didn't take notes on it.
Yeah, I kind of agree, and that's why
Yeah.
this for me, I haven't felt this strongly about a book, because again, if I'm not liking it, I just stop.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't have time for this. So
Oh, actually, that's true. The ones that when I looked back that I didn't like, I hadn't actually finished either. So
yeah.
I couldn't really, this was the best one.
Okay. So well, we hope that you got something out of our discussion, and we would love to know, are there books that you loved or books that you've hated to the point where you had to say something to your family members, your friends, your book
Yep.
club, whatever. I'm sure we've all had that experience.
Tell us too. We want to know too. Put it in the comments. What book did you not like? Hate? Wasn't for you. And happy reading. Thank you for joining us on our bookish journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, rating, and reviewing Canada Reads American Style wherever you listen. You can connect with the podcast and Rebecca on Instagram at Canada Reads American Style and with Tara at On a Branch Reads. Until next time, keep reading.